Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I am delighted to be joined by Sean Connolly. We're here, of course, to talk about Celtic versus Dundee United. Sean, you've been in Scotland, you've been in God's country, and you're back in your familiar surroundings over in Australia. How are you, mate? It was good to see you over here getting involved with the Acsom live match day event.
Yeah, as you said, it's a good night for you guys. It's a good morning for me now, back in the West Australian time zone. It was really great to be over and escape this disgusting heat. Yeah, it's like back here. It's actually quite a mild 30 today, so that's not too bad. It was very nice getting the snow, getting the cold, being able to go out and go for a walk without just having sweat running down parts of your body that you shouldn't mention in a podcast. It's also really nice to connect with people at the live events. That was great to get into Bad. I spoke to some people who maybe listen now, maybe not. That was really nice as well. Having people just coming up and having a chat and just letting me know that they listen, and that's cool. You know, even if they were very critical, you know, Sean, you talk nonsense. So nah, they weren't, but you know what I mean. Like, it's nice to just connect with people in that sense.
It is. It really is. That's what these live events are tremendous for, actually. Meeting people behind the avatar, actually meeting them in person. It's great fun. Straight off the bat, we've got Paul Rees coming in to say, happy with Ida getting another start. A couple of goals will kick him on. We're going to be looking at the starting 11. Mike C, hello from the USA. Hello to you, Mike. I'm on the hoops indeed. And Paddy Burns, what is the team for the game tonight? Can anyone please tell me? Well, we can tell you because we've got it right here. Let's bring it up. Here we go, and we'll remove the banner so we can see it in all its absolute glory. Here we go then, Sean. I mean, lots has been made, obviously, about the post-match. I was just saying to you before we came on, a lot of the focus has been on non-football stuff this week, but we're back to the football. There's your starting 11. It's the same as the team that started against St Mirren. I've got Schmeichel, Johnson, Carter, Vickers, Trusty and Taylor, McGregor, Engels and McEwen, Kuhn, Maeda and Ida. On the bench, Sinisalo, Scales, Palmer, Kyogo, Baye, Yang, Bernardo, Hatate and Ralston. What have you made of it? You've not had a chance to talk about it. What have you made of the furore?
Around Greg Taylor, you mean, or more broadly?
Yeah, the Greg Taylor stuff, the fans being disrespectful, clapping the team when they go back and all this kind of stuff. The timing seems a bit off, Sean. That's the biggest thing, isn't it?
It was very curious. Even like the tone of it was very random, and it really dominated the news cycle in a way that was disappointing. You know, I tuned into the Super Scoreboard on Monday like everyone else, hoping to hear some crying people from Govan, and instead it was just all Celtic fans, you know, clapping back at Brendan Rodgers, as the young kids say. They clap back. Yeah, it was weird. I didn't agree with his points. I didn't agree with the criticism of the Tierney song. I don't think that. I don't think Tierney coming in means that we want Taylor out in any way. I didn't agree with that. And a lot of people interpreted that. And again, I listened back to it. Rodgers said that fans expressed frustration, and they did. But then, for some reason, that's been translated into many quarters as booing, which is not the case. It's grumbling. And then I was watching the game, and I kind of got the point of the grumbling. It was because, you know, we had such an inept performance in the Derby game, and then it kind of felt like it was starting the same in that game. And look, it could have been different. 2 minutes into the game, like we've got a break on, and Maeda's about to get put through in goal. Marcus Fraser just blatantly pulls him down, and there's not even a yellow card. And like, okay, and you know, at that point it's going to be a frustrating afternoon, because like they're just going to be allowed to do whatever they want, and the referee's going to let them away with it, and we're going to have a struggle. And it was interesting as well that I wonder now if this Engels set piece is just going to be quite an important repertoire to our set piece, to our important addition to our repertoire going forward for breaking teams down. In much the way back when we had Martin O'Neill, we often relied on a set piece goal, and even in Rodgers' first spell, we often relied on a Dedrick Boyata header or something like that to break the deadlock at times when teams were being really stodgy, when we were fatigued, when we weren't playing our best, you know, like when we've become predictable often. And I also think, sorry, I'm going on like a third point here now, but Rodgers also mentioned recently, specifically used multiple times the term refreshing the attacking options in January. So I do wonder if he feels we've become predictable as well.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting. I mean, we're well in now. We're 8 days into January, and the conversation's been dominated by all these matters that you've already covered there, Sean. Rather than talking about the incomings, the outgoings, we've not really had time to focus on all of that. But after the 12:30, after the 12:30, we were having a wee chat, the four of us today, and we pointed out, Sean, and this is Scottish football in a nutshell. We played at Ibrox, we were rotten, we didn't deserve to win, that's fine. But it's no fine. But, in terms of this point, for 90 minutes, all you heard was sectarian bile. It's all you heard, 90 minutes, right? No one bats an eyelid in the Scottish media. No one mentions it. Nobody. Celtic fans sing a song about Kieran Tierney, and we're getting pulled over the coals, and it's dominating, as you say, all the phone-ins, it's on the back pages, the whole thing. Scottish football is insane. Tonight, of course, we are covering Celtic versus Dundee United. Sean and I will be looking through the team, and we'll be looking at every single member of that starting 11, and we'll have a wee chat about how they've started the season. The match officials tonight, Kevin Clancy is the referee. Video assistant ref is Stephen McLean. We've got the assistant ref 1, Graham Stewart, assistant referee 2, Colin Drummond, fourth official, Alistair Grieve, and assistant VAR official, Alan Mulvaney. Now, that wee incident that you mentioned when Fraser takes out Maeda, Fraser ends up getting a booking in the game. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating as hell, Sean, because, like you say, set out your stall as the referee, have control of the game. I mean, I'm one of these kind of guys, maybe naively, you can tell me you're more experienced in this area of the game. If it happens in the first minute or it happens in the 67th minute, should it make a difference? If you're a referee, should it make a difference?
I mean, it can in the sense, totting up, you can get persistent fouling, and you can even get ones where it's not persistent foul and it's just oh, look, I feel like this guy's going to hurt someone if I don't give him a booking. Even if it's just a couple of niggly fouls, you feel like someone's been too aggressive. He's done a couple of fouls, no, I need you to calm down. Here's a yellow kind of thing, and it works. But yeah, that one was just blatant. That was the rule is if you stop a promising attack, then it's a yellow card, and that is look, if you deliberately pull someone back, it's yellow. There was so many different interpretations of why that was a yellow card, and instead what he does is just gives the guy a warning because he's scared of sending someone off at some point, and it just gives him carte blanche to do what he wants. And then you find out the one he gets booked for in the 70th minute is no different from the one in the second minute, and it would have prevented all the incidents in between happening if the ref had done his job properly and booked him in the second minute. He's just afraid. He's afraid of the criticism. There's too much. I assume that's the reason. Because sometimes, there's been a lot of criticism of referees lately, and a lot of it's coming from a certain specific individual. I was going to say from one half of Glasgow, but I feel like it's really coming from one individual whom after winning the Derby game 3-0, spends the first 1 to 2 minutes of his post-match interview talking about a cup final from weeks before. Mm-hmm. So I think, this is how we got in this position before this season, and it feels like they're trying to get back to where they were with their rabble-rousing and their overt calling out of surnames that has been happening in my time, since Walter Smith was first manager in the 90s. It's naked, it's dog whistle, and I'd like to hope, and so far Willie Collum's been pretty on the money, been very transparent, and that seems to have created a kind of more level playing field. Even if, when referees make bad decisions, we can kind of see, and they put their hand up, it's great. Cool. You put your hand up, you say, we're going to try and get better. I love that. I love that they're doing that. Everyone makes mistakes. Do that, man. I really appreciate that. I don't appreciate this, calling people out by their surname and talking about what school they went to. It's unsavoury. It's bad for Scottish football. It's a bad look.
It is. It definitely is. And like you say, with regards to transparency, it's what we've been looking for, Sean. And I think if you're doing a job where you're never really taken into account, certainly not publicly, then you ask yourself, are you going to improve? The big thing about refereeing in Scotland is my long-term view, and it will always remain, that in order for us to have the best possible standard of referee, we have to have full-time referees. We've got to have guys that it's not a side hustle. If they don't get a game or they don't get a bonus, it doesn't matter, because they've got their full-time job that pays their their mortgage and all their bills in any case. And I just think that's where we need to go. And hopefully, in my lifetime, certainly we will. Let's have a look at some of the comments before we have a look at United team. And then we pick our way through the Celtic starting 11. Paddy Burns, you're in. What is the team for the game tonight? Well, we have already mentioned it and we'll bring it back up. Sharon Thompson, get our gloves on and pick up the points. That always reminds me, getting the gloves on for the game. I remember talking to Joe McAlinden, who sometimes pops up in the comments section, who went on to form a band called Superstar, who were signed to Creation Records. And he told me the story that in the Hampden season, which was a tough one, by the way, a really tough season, he would go to the games with a friend of his called Jim Lambie. Two Celtic fans going to the games. And they were so skint that they could only afford one pair of gloves, Sean. So one of them got them in the first half and one of them got them in the second half. And you fast forward to now, all these years later, and Joe McAlinden's a very successful musician, and Jim Lambie is a world-renowned artist who travels the world and does exhibitions in Japan and all this kind of stuff. But back in 94, 95, they only had one pair of gloves between them. Going to watch Celtic. There we go. 573 versus 13. Hail, hail, Acsom troops. Is that Bertie Auld mural from Jimmy McGrory, James McGrory Park, St. Roch's home stadium? I think it might be. Jerry, you're back in. What's Bailly supposed to do to get a chance? Rodgers not giving him a chance. We spoke about this today, Sean, regardless of what Brendan Rodgers thought about Bailly and how he's been playing. Greg Taylor's getting a game anyway, isn't he, after everything that's happened? So it was a strange dynamic coming into tonight's game. You think to yourself, maybe it would be a good game to start the young lad. Give him another start, see how he gets on. What have you made of Alex Bailly since he came in?
Yeah, I think I did the match coverage with you when he made his debut against, was it Falkirk? And people in the comments were slaughtering him, absolutely slaughtering him. And I was like, nah, like he's just adapting to the physicality in Scotland, and he's adapted well. I think he's much more of a dynamic attacking threat than Greg Taylor is. He's got more pace, he's got a better turn. He seems to also be a bit braver in the ball at times, which I guess, but the one thing I would say is his positional discipline isn't quite as good as Greg Taylor, even though, Taylor sometimes is called into question. I think we saw in the 3-0 game, he was actually one of the better players in terms of his positional discipline defensively. The main criticism of him in that game was he wasn't providing an out ball or anything going forward. And the fact, I don't know that our fullbacks really do get up as much as, Bailly does. And that's, I do wonder about that, maybe Bailly needs a bit more space to run into. Maybe he's not so good at being intricate against these low blocks. So it could be anything to do with that, because I don't think Greg Taylor's in for his positional defensive discipline tonight against a team who are not going to give too much threat, I would have thought, based on the evidence of the last game we played against them at Tannadice. I don't remember that they had a shot out of maybe one long-range shot in that game. They didn't really offer much, to be honest.
See, the big thing as well about the left-back position, we were discussing it earlier on today, Sean, and you look at the scenario and think, well, Greg Taylor, if we do sign Tierney, which looks as though it's going to happen at some point this month, Greg Taylor then becomes your backup, per se. But because of, obviously, the games that Tierney's missed over the last few seasons, I think he's averaging 35 games a season since he broke into Celtic's senior team, Kieran Tierney. And you look at that and think, well, all right, so if he's playing 35 games a season and you've got a backup, your backup's going to get plenty of game time, Sean. Plenty of game time. He's going to start games. I made the point that actually at this stage of their respective careers, Kieran Tierney and Greg Taylor are both 27. They both made their senior debuts at 17. Yet Tierney's made more appearances at this stage of his career than Greg Taylor has. A lot of people might find that quite surprising because Tierney's injury woes have been well publicised. That's constantly focused on. And I think that, if Taylor's going to be the backup, this is the issue. Because we don't pair backups. Generally, we don't pair
starters either.
Yeah, exactly, to that level. So the point I made earlier on was, you look at Bernabe, who had come in as a backup initially, maybe to push for the jersey, and he was on something like 12 to 14 grand, and he was a backup, which I think to myself, that's fine. Celtic can handle that as a backup player. Tony Ralston's on a similar wage at right back. But the point I made was, okay, so if you're going to have 2 left backs, because that's going to be the medium-term solution, Baye goes back to Barcelona at the end of the season, and we've got Tierney and Taylor, and they're sharing the game time, although Tierney is the first pick. And they're both on a decent wage. So the figures we're looking at is 35 and 25 grand. But they're your 2 left backs. I made the point that Ida coming in for the money he came in for will be on a decent wage. Kyogo will be one of the highest paid players because he's not long signed a new contract at Celtic. So we've got that scenario at centre forward. Is it any different from having that scenario at left back? And a few people in the comments after the live show today were saying, well, it's slightly different. It's different when it's a striker. Do you think it is?
I think it is, but don't know that it should be. I feel like strikers are kind of harder to come by. That's why we kind of got money back for Klimala when he left. You know, they're a little bit rarer, especially nowadays. I think maybe back in the 90s when we played 2 up front, there was a lot more strikers and there was a lot less focus on strikers at that point as well. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, there shouldn't be much of a difference, really. I do wonder if it is. Yeah, because I mean, how much would we have to pay to get someone in to be a backup that's going to be better or equivalent to Greg Taylor? I don't. Obviously, you could sign whatever equivalent of Greg Taylor is kicking around the Scottish League, but then that's Greg Taylor 5 years ago, and that's not equivalent, right? That's somebody who's not as good as Greg Taylor currently is.
Yeah.
And that's the risk you're going to take. Like, take the money you're going to use to sign a replacement, put it into Greg Taylor's contract, right? That's seems really obvious to me. But there's just some sort of business model that, I don't know. We obviously, Celtic were balking at paying all this money last summer, and they eventually, and it felt like, there was a real reluctance to do it, but they eventually did it.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like this is another situation like that, where Rodgers is saying, we want the best squad possible. This is what it's going to cost us, and the board are reluctant to change. They're reluctant to do it because it's a change from the way they've done things over the last 20 years or so. And it feels like that again. It feels like we're back in the summer. And I do wonder, and I hope it's not true, but I wonder whether Greg Taylor signs a new contract with us or not. If that feels like it's a kind of red flag issue around the board adapting to what the manager wants and the evolution of the club and our squad.
The big thing for me again is, and Brendan Rodgers has touched on this, Sean, is that you reduce the number of players in your first team squad and you make it more compact. And you can get that scenario where you've got Tierney and Taylor at left back because you don't have this surplus of players, the non-contributors. And I mentioned a few earlier on today, guys like Nawrocki, Lagerbielke's out on loan, of course, Odin Holm. These guys are not playing. Palmer, they're not playing, they're not contributing. Yet they're drawing a decent enough wage. And if you combine all those wages, it's money down the drain. But you made a good point in relation to what does it cost to replace Greg Taylor? If Greg Taylor leaves the football club, and I'm not talking about Tierney because we're going to have to sign a backup, right? So what does a backup left back cost the football club? You look at Bolingoli, remember him? And Bolingoli cost around £3 million when we signed him. Didn't work out. Diego Laxalt, if you look at the reports around his loan deal at the time, coming in from AC Milan, we paid something like £2 million of a loan fee to bring him to the football club. And then you've got Alexandro Bernabei, 3.75 million. There's 3 examples. So what are you talking? Ballpark, £3 million, £3.5 million. And you think, like yourself, I'm looking at that and going, we've got a guy here. We know his attributes. We know what he can do. And he's got the experience and he's a decent squad player in terms of being a popular member of that squad, a leader within that squad, Sean. He's got all these things. And you think, well, just back him. And what's the argument over? Is it $5,000 a week? Is that the difference? Is this what we're talking about? Because if that's the case, then move on Nawrocki, move on Odin Holm, move on Palmer, move these guys on and use the funds differently. And I know that we still need to bring in wingers, etc. But there's far too many guys for me drawing a wage, and I would much rather see that wage diverted to sort out this wee problem that we've got at the moment. And I hope it doesn't linger. I really do. I hope, in a day or two or maybe in a game or two, we're no longer speaking about it. Paul, you're back in and you're saying that Brendan is an absolute legend in Swansea. You won't find anyone disagreeing with that down here. I've heard that myself, Paul. I know a couple of guys for Swansea, and they say exactly the same. Forever and ever Celtic, we watched him make runs. We're talking about Ida, drop deep, occupy the centre-backs, create space. Ida had a decent game the last time out. We're going to start then with Adam Ida, the man at the forefront of Celtic's attack. Kyogo, I spoke a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that he's not a million miles away from hitting 100 goals for Celtic. Can he do it this season? And it was like on the back of him scoring a brace. And we go against, Rangers, and you know what happened there. And obviously, he goes through these wee spells when he's playing in this Brendan's side, Sean, where he goes through little droughts, doesn't he? Where he's not scoring the goals, looks a wee bit frustrated. Ida comes in. I still rate him highly. I feel no different about Ida than I did last season, even though he was scoring big goals last season. Just the whole nature of that campaign. What he needs a wee run of games, I think, Adam Ida. And he's, tonight is 2 games on a bounce where he started. I agree with the comment. I thought he was okay. He didn't have a great chance. He never had a one-on-one. He never had a moment that he fluffed his line, Sean. He did lead the line pretty well. The other thing I would throw into the mix there with the critique of his performance, I thought his defensive play was brilliant. He was back, winning headers. He was dropping deep, holding the ball up, winning tackles. I just think we've got to be a wee bit more patient with Adam Ida.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes from he's not doing it through, like, he's not consistent throughout within a game. Like he'll disappear for spells within a game, which I guess is a thing that Kyogo does as well. But Ida will also have spells where he'll have some bad touches. But then the problem is that he set himself a really high bar in that Kilmarnock game last year. And we're all kind of, and then the cup final, I guess, as well. And we're all kind of looking for him to do that consistently within a game and between games. And he's not quite done that yet, but he's still young. In my experience, these big players need a bit of time and a bit of run. You're talking about getting a run of games. We used to, I don't know if people remember this, but this was a problem we had with Jota as well. Was whenever Jota was out injured and he came back in, the first 3 games, he'd be like, Jota, man, come on, what's going on? And then by the 4th game, he'd get into a stride and he'd start scoring important goals and, taking guys on. So I do wonder that there's often something to that. And I don't think that he does a problem by any means. I think he's doing well. Obviously there was a spell when he first came back, his touch was a bit rusty and stuff like that, but I don't think that's the issue here. I think it's just, I think he just, as you said, needs a run. I think it's going to click for him. He's going to improve. He's young. I do actually like it, the guy. I don't know that there's any better strikers in Scotland than the 2 we've got. Although that said, that Rangers striker looked good at the weekend, but that was the first time he's actually looked that good. So they're probably going to ship him on in the next 2 weeks, I reckon, now that he scored a hat-trick.
The thing is, as well, this time last season, later on during the season, we were hearing all about Shankland being a better striker than Kyogo. I agree with you. I think we've got 2 fantastic strikers. It's about keeping them happy and keeping them sharp. There are certain players that just takes them that few games to get into a rhythm and into their groove. Adam Ida, this season, he broke his duck in the Champions League. He is scoring or creating a goal every 116 minutes. He's not got a bad record this season. It's just been a bit of a stop-start campaign for him, I think. The big moments we talk about from last season, he was brilliant against Kilmarnock that night. Absolutely brilliant. You remember his double against Hibs, his double against Motherwell. He scored 2 goals against Rangers. One of them won us the cup. So there's all these kind of like touch points. You think, Adam Ida had a good season. And I keep saying it. He's going to have big moments this season as well. And, the month of January, there's a couple of good opportunities for him if he's able to take them to have those big moments. We touched on, and I know I'm jumping ahead a wee bit, we touched on a couple of Champions League games we've got at the end of this month, Sean. And you're just thinking to yourself, all this nonsense and this noise that we've been dealing with this week, let's draw a line. Let's move on. We've got like massive games coming up here. We've got the Scottish Cup game. We've got to maintain our lead at the top of the league. We've got 2 Champions League games, 1 at home, 1 away. We could qualify into the playoff section of the Champions League. I mean, let's just get back to the basics here and remember how good a side we are and how good a season we're having as well, Sean.
Yeah, and look, these games are coming thick and fast at the moment. There's no winter break. There's games every 3 to 4 days. I think a large part of why Ida is playing tonight is because of the fatigue that that's my alarm in case I was asleep. Because of the fatigue, the loading that Brendan Rodgers mentioned and then mentioned that he doesn't mention, which was a really weird thing to do. Fatigue, which we don't talk about, but you just anyway. But I think that exactly. But I think it is a big thing at the moment. I think it's probably why the wingers have dropped a little bit. I think it's why Luke McCowan's starting again tonight. But if I'm reading the stats correctly, this is Luke McCowan's 19th appearance for us. A player who we were talking about, would he actually get a game when we signed him? Was he just here to help out in training? And we're now 9th of January. He signed end of September, start of September, and he's now played 19 games. So if we're talking about, sorry, I don't want to retread too much, but if we're talking about Taylor being a backup, well, Luke McCowan's 5th choice centre mid, and this is his 19th appearance tonight. So this is Celtic. This is the standards. We're going to have 60 games a season. If you're the backup, you can expect to start at least 15 and be coming off the bench for at least another 15. So a backup is doing what in the past would have been equivalent to almost a full season back in the day. I'm sure Darren Jackson never played that many games in a season for Celtic. Not the way picking him, which is the first name that came into mind in terms of a Scottish-based backup player. I think that the fatigue is where we're at just now. I'm just stunned. This is the first time in years we've had this many games at this point in January, because we've always had the break. So I'm just looking at it. I'm like, man, I'm going to get out of bed at 4 a.m. every night for the next few weeks. every Thursday morning for the next few weeks. It's scanning on me.
It is wild. I'm going to say this. I know I'm older than you, Sean, but Luke McCowan makes me feel old, and I'll explain why. A few years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago, I was in this person's house that I knew at the time, and he was showing me some stuff that had Celtic-related materials that he was wanting to offload, and images and all this kind of stuff. And there was 2 trophies, right? 2 trophies, and I thought to myself, what's this all about? One of them's actually sitting right there behind my monitor, and it was 2 trophies that had been presented to young Celtic players 20 years before. And for some strange reason, the players had never received them, and they were sitting in this guy's gaff. And I was thinking, that's bizarre. I'm going to get these back to the 2 respective players. Obviously, one of them's still sitting in my room here, but I do know where he works, so I won't get that to him. But the other one was John Paul Dow, and I remembered JP Dow because he was a goal scorer. And you know how you would have the Celtic view and goal scorers were always being spoken about. But not only that, he also played in the same team as Pallyman, who was signed S1 for Celtic. And John Paul Dow is Luke McCowan's uncle, and I'm now looking at Celtic players and thinking, wow, they're no longer contemporaries, Sean. They're much, much younger than that. So JP Dow, brilliant goal scorer, never quite made grade at Celtic. His nephew is Luke McCowan, and he starts tonight. He might have got rid of the peroxide here. You're sticking with it, which I'm delighted to see. Big Red, here we go. Nice meeting you, Sean, with Lawrence in Bad. So there's someone who did see you and speak to you when you were over.
Mate,
yeah. And here's the Dundee United side for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. So we've got Walton, Savelge, Graham, Trapanovsky, Ferry, Odada. You know the thing, I should always check this beforehand in case there's some dodgy pronunciations coming. Middleton, and there we go. Adig Boyaga, there you go. Fotheringham, Van der Sand, and Gallagher. And
if it goes anything,
away strip.
I think it's an away strip. But I'm telling you, if this goes anything like the last game, the 0-0 game, that's Seville, or however you say it, number 5. He's the one in the last game that couldn't buy a booking, no matter what he did. So watch out for him tonight to do the thing. Was it Mark Power or whatever it's Kilmarnock used to always do, and the players that go out and just put on all these fouls but never get booked. Graham Shinney, that type of role. So watch out for Seville, or however you pronounce it.
Aberdeen have got 2 of them because they've got Shinney and they've got Nielsen, who seem to have to 7 or 8 offences before they get a booking, and then Callum McGregor, 1 offence, he's in the book. How do you see it going tonight? What's your prediction for this evening, Sean?
My prediction is Celtic TV will black out at some point again.
Apparently, it already has.
Oh, jeez. I've seen in the comments here Pete Scally saying he's watching on United TV, and I think that speaks to everything about Celtic TV. If anyone at Celtic TV is listening and would like me to tell them what they need to do to get a functional product, I worked in IT. I'm happy to fill them in if they would like to reach out to me. But they don't respond to my emails. It's ongoing shambles. But in terms, I'm sure what you meant was score prediction. Dundee United have I believe, the second best defense in the league after us. So I think they're going to. That's going to be their modus operandi. I think they're going to do the Derek McInnes tactic, which is to not really try to do anything other than stop us scoring, keep us to 0 or 1 goals for 75 minutes, and then try and hit in the break, get the subs on for the last 15, and hit in the break, which is a classic Derek McInnes tactic. That's what I anticipate tonight. So hopefully the fans don't get frustrated. If we do get an early goal, it will be a mistake or a set piece. I don't actually expect we will, because Dundee United have been very disciplined this season. What I'm expecting is potentially 0-0 at half time, and I think we'll tell in the end probably 2-0, I think.
There was a couple of predictions of 2-0 earlier on today. Let's get to the action then. Hopefully your streams out there, wherever you are in the world, they stay on and you can enjoy the action. And join us again at half time on a Celtic State of Mind.
Yeah.